quite rare. Even through Discord, I don't even... Oh, sorry. Welcome, folks. But no, this is just this current... The state of your problems and situations that do feel like it's flexed its own arms in ways which it makes sense. You can just roll this casually tonight. You don't have to game. But if you do want to, you can sit back and try something. But it's up to you. I'll just say this straight up, but I'm only gonna talk rather casually. It might get a little rowdy, just a bit later. It's as important though I don't make a real heavy noise due to the reasons that it's not too far from the middle of the night, for one thing. And that it's two-way conversation. No, just one way. Two ways. With another monitor active as well. The desktop audio needs to stay off. I'll just expand this as high as I can. I'll explain the situation. Drag it all the way down. Open up with GIMP. Edit the image. Check the Bandicam folder. Place this in there. What I'm going to show you shortly revolves around the new setting, or settings, on OBS anyway. Here. In really rare situations, I would put off the desktop audio now. But if I activate it, you hear the double sound. Do you hear it? I engage the desktop audio. Remove it now. Mute it. Mute it. Mute it like that. Left, mute. Because of a more effective trick I actually learned years ago. To further clarify. Normally, well, the way I'm having these particular settings active as well, given I usually have no one who checks Discord and all that, it doesn't bother me. And just checking a streamer and playing Impulse at the moment. I'll just say straight, the visual that says desktop audio at the top, I mean, many of these sources is what I do use to, other modifications and so on. Well, in specific broadcasts that does not contain commentary, which I do use the desktop audio feed, the part of what's called the desktop audio part, which usually is tuned up. I mean, and sometimes, in other occasions when doing commentary, it's turned down. It's normally about 0.4, about that. Negative 0.4 decibels with the desktop audio active. That's keep into account no other background noises or copyrighted sound or audio or music or whatever. This line in, which only records what's on the gaming PC, which in some cases, it would be rolling. But I have the flexibility if I just run it toward the red line, towards 0, that, or to reduce it, say -7, about that number for commentary, and about -2 running on the microphone mix. Just repeating, and the desktop audio is typically the one I have had active for several months. In this case, though, that's not where that's. I wouldn't say redacted or obsolete. And in a sense, it's just there are uses like Sean Master I played earlier. In one example, but that's a 4:3 ratio because it was not it was only fixed to 4:3 ratio. Didn't matter to me. I was used to 4:3 content. Even the 16:10, except that's exceptionally rare situations where, I can do it that way. I draw out the image in a great layer of detail to explain what I mean. V7, that's where its monitor is active. But here's the kicker as well. When using desktop audio, and the fact that I use it for monitoring purposes as well, that captures the commentary as well, or this mic. Added. The cases where when I said monitoring, where if the desktop audio was higher, that makes the mix as well. The line in, which as I said, only the game audio from the PC, the gaming PC, that's live, and goes on. Don't have to be concerned with additional commentary in single streams without simulcasting multi-streaming. Where there's some cases I also am active on Discord as well. In that case, since the V7 Ultimix, that's identical in levels and the filters. It's a silent one though. We don't have to worry for monitoring. But using V7, that's where the situation is at a great advantage in relation, where you can actually use the monitor for headphones if need be, and turn it off and often. Swing that volume dial all the way down, and just focus on the game, which I can do. But there's other cases where, have both the V7 and V7 Ultimix active at the same time. Though it only captures just the one source. It's the V7 Ultimix. The V7 that's created. Let me explain. Let's get another. I'm just going to quickly do this. Crop another screenshot. Yeah. Let's describe this. Short and sharp. In channels that the monitor's off, the beams have no audio at all. No problem. Well, for actives, there's no sounds at all. Desktop audio. It's set up the same way that I do with line in PC2. Tracks 1 and 2, which are active. The V7, if you can see clean, monitoring enabled, on the audio monitoring part. No tracks that I've set. It's left deliberately like that. The V7 Ultimix, that's only active on tracks 1 and 3, and its filters are practically the same as with the V7 source. But an additional one is in as well, which I don't use which doesn't really utilize a filter besides Loud Max, I think. I'll check it now just to verify that. The AXP soft amp, and equalizer, and Loud Max. They're the filters for the no filter one. The purpose? There's still stuff I can't exactly describe at this point. If it is in use, I'll explain later, but not in situations like this. But as well as the V7 mix, where it's only channeled onto the left channel and not to the right, nothing runs on the right. I do have. It might seem a little aged, I'll say. That Focusrite Scarlett Solo Generation 3 audio interface, but if it still works, I wouldn't, only replace it when there are flaws that are noticeable. It's fine as it is. Was word to the Commonwealth Games finished, I know. There've been a range of, curiosities, I guess you may say. You're streaming 120 FPS, I didn't notice until now. I had a suspicion, but I was just recognizing this one's an unmarked stream, and I was realizing this actually streams at 1080p 120. Is what I recognized only just then. It does have detriments because I'm assuming that it's it, yeah. Looks like it's software encoding to me. Bitrate's pretty low though. Either software encoding or hardware, but software like faster or maybe very fast encoding. But I'm only assuming things. So there are surprises every once in a while I get through. But I know most streamers, it's only that 60, not 120. Whoops. There's another slip up. And one of them, it's at 1440, with the that enhanced streaming mode and capable to do a 1440p HEVC encoding on Twitch. So there's that one as well. Just saying again that I do know some surprises that come here and there. I'm just checking all the other ones. This one's just finished. I'm about to look here at 60. I think they're all 60 except for that one that I mentioned is 120. Never deviate from the norms. That's what I won't do. I'll stick with what's tried and true. Just quickly do a monitor check. Checking canal. All's fine. Isn't too often where conditions feel decent. I mean, maybe a bit humid, I'll say, but it's great otherwise. Yeah, I get the times can tick. Just remove the two image sources and put it back with the GEKIDO basis project image. He's not being in that mood for drawing anything, but I know, given his mindset, if he did have a choice, he would do that, to do, try to sketch some stuff. I'll say it once again, basis machines don't really change much throughout the eras. It's basically out of similarities between different models. Otherwise, technically speaking, it's just doesn't really change within the times, like the Beetle. You think of the shape of the Beetle in the 1970s and the 1980s, think about it in the present day. That all in 911, if I say the Porsche 911 car. I was going to say that as well, but vehicles where their shape hasn't actually changed much throughout the different eras, right? That's what I'm thinking. Shapes of the Porsches in particular. And also some Toyotas and a few of the Toyotas I'm thinking. Still trying to focus on others. Shape of the Toyota Prius in a sense is what I'm thinking, but not too much really has changed that I've noticed. Might have been like a redesign sometime later, and it's still pretty similar to the original. That's what I'm saying. That'll even need like the MX-5, Mazda, Miata. No, I don't want to really speak about cars all the time, but I mean, 12 grown up playing games involving like such cars and machines. Just part, in a sense, a part of the way that the player thinks. Once a flow still comes around, it will be just as critical just getting the motions correct. What's different, though, is that I'm usually privy and aware with the differences between 60 and 120. Though I don't know very many outsiders who actually do 120. That's what I'm admitting to now. No matter the game. One of the last players who did do a 120 FPS broadcast is a CS2 streamer. Russian, I'm trying to remember. Russian. But that was, as I remember anyway. Just rolling things casually. The 100 I know is on TV, on the network occasionally. You know, different from one of those other sort of programs. Nothing really is happening. There is a rerun which was showing the 2006-2007 Ashes, this one in the second test, that's what it's just showing at the moment. Which I think Peterson scored 50. I mean, that's what I think it just shows. There's just examples of that. Wicked. Now, these just showing the highlights of the event. True, it is based on those times too. Yeah, really clearly. That's what I do know. But many of these promotions look like it's from a match in Australia. Or at least it seemed to be. Shane Warne still was actually, playing it in 2006, 2007, that test as well. It'd be among the last of his years he'd be playing, before retirement. So there's those realities too. I'm aware the man's deceased. I'm just, he's been checking the action. It's just, what's up at the moment. There was no declaration until a bit later, where Captain just makes the declaration. 6 declared for 551, as it said. That's just an example. Look, I won't be bored because, as there is only of the 6, there's one who's a 120 FPS streamer, but there's a couple of the pros who still stick at 1080p 60 and one at 1440p 60. Gets right back down, of course, to preferences because of the abilities, not abilities, but there's a word that they optimize and set it more for performance beyond details. There's some satisfaction watching those little situations just unfold in watching the highlights again of just a cricket test match, right? Not that I'm gonna say I'm excited or nothing. This is just how it goes. Did have fondness too for older tests, but maybe that's just me. Older matches, like in that around 2000 up to about 2009, 2010. That's 12s. It's in sort of the time 12 had found fond interest in it, as well as the commentators that existed at that time too. Just returning with another individual's. Well, another team is one of 3 who are remaining in the battle. In checking the just going on and all that. Just need to monitor check. Few times, the few broadcasts before, and I just done a check then. The few broadcasts which I did before as part of the GEKIDO Basis project, which, yeah, they broke down, I'll say. Where it sounded, where it did sound broken, in fairness. The group look like they're going to be ending up in third place. 2 targets killed, and just one who's still alive for the team. But this should be inevitable. Yeah, it is. Finishing in third place. Not very many matches would be left between now until the new season drops. Others who had, there's a small handful who would have had early access as well to the pre-season build. Anyway. But what's here is sometimes satisfying to sit and watch. Now game's up. But it was a pretty easy victory. Let's get back to the stream playing Impulse. Another match in the harbor. That will start in about 30 seconds. Some weird things can sometimes happen when you look deep enough about watching highlights of these cricket matches. You do see a pattern starting to emerge. And you might see certain angles which isn't too often shown. It's one tough one to play, and somehow the edge of the bat hits directly into the stumps, but rather unconventionally, I'll add. Don't have plans to sit and actually do any gaming, and I'll be coming clear about that. Okay, let's just get the situation out. So I was aware that I think as part of the new update, we can use 2 different weapons, as well as the aiming down the sights as well, which that wasn't. That was not shown up on the original version. Within the first month and a half of the Impulse experience. It was just a bit later where the aiming down the sights is possible, at least from this angle that I'm watching from this player. It also dropped, I think, less than half the viewership. I'm just going to check the current viewership to it. Don't color me surprised. That's the situation, that's what's up. Outside of, say, some other situations. Feels like it's almost one-man bowling, in the dismissals of the Australian batsmen, at least, in the angle I'm seeing. Check anyone playing SAZ at the moment. 16, at least. As many as that. Just another one. Same bowler. $2,100. Just let that run. Just come frank about a couple of matters. The matter of what 12 was explained about, well, the school thing. Which he explained directly. And he's experiencing yet in year 10 and year 11, that's where the dude did attend and stayed until having his mental breakdown that was which was not just severe, but he was having really harmful thoughts in his mind at the time too. Afterwards, I mean, this is not after, this is during the time he was up and around, as well as they still liked a few people too. Won't go too deep about that. Excuse me. Sometimes you need to actually be honest about that. What I've endured at the time. Place off the just place off the speaker. Yeah. Don't have too many tales that I want to share either. I was hearing about a beta for Gears of War E-Day. There's that as... Well, there's some other things. There's... Really wasn't too much. Making real headwind. Had seen Machine Party. To be truthful, it's... does have some strange sensations that only well it's too random, I'd say. And the fact that we're in recognizing as a matrixified environment is, well, more of a polarizing thing, if you ask me. Didn't really see which is making the hits. Mistfall Hunter was one. Not that bad. I'll say it that way. Just the pool, I feel, is too muddy. There's not enough that feels like there's diamonds under the rough. In the rough, excuse me. And the same actually applies to any streamers I see nowadays. Just even finding any other 120 FPS streamers on Twitch is tough. It's not really as straightforward. I'll say it that way. I'll just come clear. It isn't that simple to be searching for other streamers who do that. Between some of us soldiers that are fully aware of the clarity differences. 60 FPS and 120 FPS. For the trained eye, it's more noticeable. Artifacts are usually present in a 120 FPS broadcast in comparison to a 60 FPS broadcast. The fluidity, that's usually without any equal in that case. Smooth as it gets. No matter if it's on console or on PC. Anyway, What's great though, at least on the Foxtel channels, 50 frames per second. Another dismissal. Warn balded. Here's another situation where there's another one that's spun out. It was quite a deep amount of spin too. Stumped. It's a batsman who hits it, edged it, and it's straight to the stump. Don't really know. Center, the middle and the leg, I think. Well, middle and the off stump. Isn't as familiar with the positions. They still can be, well, for a certain moment, so I'm just gonna lay and keep watching. It's all for free, of course. Others have to rely on advertisements. Another PC game I hadn't seen before. Not until I've only realized what it is. Little accomplishments. Searching them. Search again on the new one with the 120 FPS tag. I'm just checking. Yeah, this one is as well, so I'll set that one up and place in the corner. It's getting a little overblown. If the broadcast cuts off eventually, then the reasons are simply it's overloaded, okay? No other way to put it. Put that and just down to put everything at 480p except for certain others. Maintain fluidity on only 2 broadcasts. Memory thing. In terms of the amount of RAM though, different situation. Yep, soon there will be hype for something different. Quite a simple target to have to get 168. There already were 116 runs. The wicket had, 3 down. And that shot of Freddie Flintoff as well. Nothing. Punter was 1 run short of 50 as well. The next situation that happened, a few balls later, it was quite a, lofty hit. Went a couple, bounces into toward the boundary, then Flintoff again. And this is different species of birds, like pigeons, I think. It was all seemingly easy for Australia to get that target, at least when looking at it from this perspective. Another wicket, and bowled by Flintoff, but someone catched it. maintain only 2 broadcasts now I'm watching, which have which run at 120 FPS instead of which running at another frame rate. Well, in there was the finale. So it was 4 runs, which conclude the victory. Or at least, well, towards it. It was scores of deadlock. Any ball, anything can happen, and you know that. And it's just surrounded by a flock of birds, too. Well, the highlights for the 100 as well, they're only 20 minutes in length. Isn't anything that's live as... Right. Something at 10 o'clock where there's softball. Little league softball. There isn't really anything beyond that. Others are just like panel shows or just other shows like that. Personally, it doesn't interest me. I was going to search which teams are playing who in the AFL, which I'm going to look at now. To make matters that little easier, I'm going to let the folks know too. Let me show up the top 12 teams. The ones who've... include the wild cards as well. That's the list. Already... No one can beat the Fremantle team for the minor premiership. No one can. The 22nd round will be the next one. Order is as follows. Fremantle first. They play Melbourne, Sydney. They play Port Adelaide. Hawthorn who play Brisbane. The Adelaide team plays against Richmond. That should be very simple. That should be a really easy one. Brisbane who play Hawthorn. I said Hawthorn's playing Brisbane, didn't I? So those, it's 3rd versus 5th. You wouldn't want to be underestimating certain other teams too. 1st v 6 and 3rd versus 5th. Pretty easy. This next one's going to be easy between Geelong versus Essendon. That's very easy. Not really sure about between Western Bulldogs and North Melbourne. It's likely it still will be Footscray in that one. The Collingwood plays West Coast. 9th against one of the bottom teams. Carlton, their matches against the Saints or St Kilda Football Club. 10th versus 11th. GWS that plays against Gold Coast. Further down as well. The losers. I'll say it's as straightforward as that. I'll briefly check the fixture and then I'll close it. There's one on Friday. Likely I'm going to skip Thursday. But I'll be checking Friday and Saturday's matches. They're still final shaping. That I know. Two of the battles for the wild card, at least, play on Sunday, so that makes some more sense to me. Where now? I'm only going to observe the scores between Footscray and North Melbourne, personally. I don't have any interest in little by little, play-by-play. No, that's not how I'm going to run it, no. It's that one Friday, which is, well, teams which have battled for double chance. I mean, Carlton slaughtered Brisbane, the previous round, as I'm aware of that. I mean, it was surprisingly much larger a result in terms of the margin. More specifically, it was 76 points. It was almost double what Brisbane scored. They didn't play Hawthorn there in form. That's what we'll say. But I just have a hunch that indeed the Brisbane team can get their hands back on deck. They're playing one of the best teams in the competition, that's my take. That and then there's Melbourne against Fremantle that plays on Saturday morning. Well, I say morning because over in the west it is the morning. In the east it's the afternoon. I said in that point. I'll just need a bit of time as well. I just stay focused on watching one of the two 120 FPS broadcasters. TomsHardware.com, and check the news here. At least 37 people arrested in 2026 so far for protesting data centers, most for breaking petty rules, as it says anyway. People from all walks of life are risking their freedom to stop data centers in their communities. I'm sure they also were mentioning of the GTX 1080 Ti earlier. What I mean is, which they're explaining for, had been around for 10 years. Right. Reads here, 16 gigabytes GPUs and 8 core CPUs officially become the most popular configs on Steam. Well, the CPU I have on both the streaming and the base PC is a 16 core processor. Same with the gaming PC processor. Well, I'll just elaborate again. AMD Ryzen 9 7950X 3D processor that I'm using right now, which I'm not using for streaming. This is hardware encoded, not software encoded. The other, which is an AMD Ryzen 9 as well, 9950X 3D 16-core processor as well. And I can mention the GPUs I have. In the streaming and general purpose computer, it's a GeForce RTX 4060. In the gaming rig, which is a GeForce RTX 5060 Ti, 16 gigabyte version. It's still quiet down in this house. Well, frankly, I'm sitting here and just reading the situations. 3 major PC makers now using Chinese memory to fight unprecedented memory storage, the report claims. Which new report which claims that HP, Asus, and Acer have started to use a small amount of CXMT memory chips in notebooks for non-US markets. Right. Let's check. China cracks down on copycat chip designs with new regulations and penalties. China tightens legal protections for domestically developed chip layout designs by raising originality requirements and strengthening infringement penalties. That explained another story where the NVIDIA or NVIDIA RTX 50 series 50 series price is jumping around about 30% or so in South Korea, as it says. There wasn't too much else outside of those stories. Do you want to go and search another segment I do read about? Continuing. Right, 36KR. Rates here, China Joy Observation. The era of generating a game with one sentence has arrived, and 90% of AI games may die. Well, I'd say more than. What about that other AI slap music video? Haven't seen it yet. No, I don't see anything I found of worth. That was about it. But yeah, no, I'm aware of also like the oil price and fuel prices that have well, that's also happened, I'll say. Reading on exactly the numbers as it shows here currently, WTI crude 77.86 points. It's dropped down negative 2.48, negative 3.09%. Brent crude currently 81.77 points, negative 2, negative 2.39%, now down to negative 2.49%. 2.09, 81.68 as it says. Merban crude, 79.26 cents. I said points, I mean to say cents. Yep. Points or something, never mind it. Negative 1.79, negative 2.21%. Natural gas, 2.706. Down, dropped negative 2.70. Gasoline, 2.881, negative 2.88%. Heating oil, 3.780, negative 2.51%. WTI Midland, that's 78.20, negative 3.66%. The OPEC basket, or the PEC basket, 79.50, down negative 8.87, negative 10.04%. Indian basket, 88.12, negative 5.41, negative 5.78%. That's where they are trending, at least at the moment. Being drops in around the board, but didn't really know what was going on. Was there another ceasefire thing or something? I have no idea. Want game on, like I said, but I'm gonna keep the fans off. Why in the blazes would we still be following dumb things about people who like visual novels? Honestly, I want to skip this one. These don't work for me. I'll say straight up. Leaving that one off. Never very much. Just leave the show rolling. Just the way that this is in the situation. Yeah, I don't know where else to roll. If I did have a choice, I would instead just roll at 720p 120 running a game, but just one of them cases where I've consumed too much water. And I'm still sipping on water here and there. A few times I've been out in the restroom. That makes come clear. I thought the come clear on that matter. Just need to live and briefly. The AI systems can suck it up. For what avail? It's based on abilities. Can't screw the decks. You feeling okay in there? Okay. It's still a bit messy. I think what I have done, though, I've at least cleaned a few things up. Isn't without all the detriments. I did come fresh from the other experience that had happened as part of that. Just trying to think. A bounty event that had happened and had finished off. I didn't check the results. Next is the VIS, I think. Blast Bounty 2026 season 2, I'm pretty sure. Yep. Next event. There's at least a few. Yeah, there's 3 matches that's live. So I'll just check one of those. Is it just you have more small holes in your teeth? Still won't affect you. Yeah, exactly employing a degree of creativity in the brain. You don't want to be running too many windows at the same time either. Still, and you've already been focused to the sweetheart game yourself. And the reason why, well, it had been out on other consoles and on PC on Steam as well. Since much of the bubbles that played on though it had already crashed and burned. Well, it's only real small contingency would only fall through. Can never forget the sensation it used to be anyway. All the way back in late 2023. Stuff I wouldn't forget. Still some extremes in, to learn a few tricks. Getting over the top or too excessive on the samples. There aren't any really significant problems at the moment. Stay steady, don't get No, just don't get aggressive. Do not do so. Just concentrate on which ways that the rhythms are gonna roll. If you did have a choice, you know what you could have ran. You don't want it to become too overwhelming, don't you? This is the simulation of course, gunfire and reloading. Just in and out. Peek. Just done, the typical stuff. Until only earlier tonight, I was only aware. Well, there were a couple which were running at 120 FPS. But there wasn't much outside of that. That other matter about, a few of the points about the place, as I call it. Poignant in a sense. There's not much in this city anyway. In comparison to the big city, there's plenty you can, do the recreational stuff. Yeah, at a cost, at like a small cost, but not really anything serious. Just another monitor check. Just do a check. No problems here. Isn't really too much, I want to say. Boring Tuesday, really. birthday, was it? Yeah. So there's that one as well. Never really wanted to get around and chat. I mean, you're a little fatigued. But at least you know that, of course, you won't be surrounded by too much paranoia. Or at least the sense in it. Be even fortunate to even get one. A match in. And it'll take a while before you jump into another match. So still watching well. Well, still the player is still there running impulse. It's waited over 3.5 minutes since it began hitting the button. It would roll for some entertainment value at least. True, and they wouldn't all be. Finding comfort to a depressed man. Or depressed entity. For some others, entertainment value and the feelings of joy, excitement, fearlessness seem more attractive to many others. In the game I've ran, it's important to maintain a cold mind. Where else are you meant to go? To hunt for dirty fish. Try to hunt for the cleanest fish among all that mess. We're of a rare breed too. Won't be walking away. Won't ever give up my fight. But at the same time, as I said, it ain't clean. Not in the experiences I've been in. Risk-taking has sometimes been the order. But when, of course, you feel like everybody else has just drifted away, you've just been stuck feeling hollow, I'll say. Whatever you do doesn't make a difference, you still get virtually no views on the net. There's still a dedicated few who remain there and stay, at least, loyal. And those do matter in a sense. It's been effectively redact and a dispensable entity. I couldn't care what anyone even said to me. I wouldn't ever be considered such a toy. As I'm not a toy. I'm a real soldier of the art. And it does also mean that it's important never to screw up royal. And all of us make mistakes too. I mean, in the game of streaming, the stream game too matters. Just keep this attack coming. Show them nothing, or at least as little as you can. Just keep moving and just strike through. Well, there's been 2 weapons to make a diff. In comparison with a 1 weapon system, which felt like a mistake early on. It does mean, well, not as much, but for the loyalists, they'll be happy enough with the improvements. So that's just what's up. Don't really read too much about some of the other stories. Not known, of course, to being, of course, very easygoing. The reasons for the entertainment do differ. I don't like, of course, the humorous stuff. As there's plenty of humorous stuff that'll be enough to make me feel a little screwed up. In fairness, I was about to say some other words, but it's as important to just continue to maintain a clean tongue. It's not easy. Given I might have a rather simple list of stuff that does excite me, I really want to talk about the new recipes that people are talking about. There's occasions some simple meals are better than, of course, more complex meals. But I don't always do fast food and all that either. It's important. Snack on some clean stuff. And as well as that, to consume quite a lot of water as well. There was, as I said, yesterday there was another story I remember talking about. Went a little about it. Was running my own tongue, figuring about, like the demo of another game, and coming back to the remaking an old game, I'll say, but one that's beloved. I'm speaking of, Tohokomakyo. The embodiment of Scarlet Devil, as it was known. But yeah, it's the remake of that game, So I was then expecting, of course, a fresh new iteration of something. Iteration originally, until I would catch the wind, you may say, to what's the new project which is being created, Shanghai House and stuff. True. Other Toho stuff still is coming around. Low frequency, but it is still, stuff to at least still check here and there. That isn't the saddest of the personal favorite stuff. Game's over. They win. In the battle at Impulse, the team that it was in part of, victory. Where to check next? No, it went offline, actually. So we can close this one. It's had enough. Mr. Checking. Can whisper if I want to. They're the only two sources active. Where to from here? Really isn't much, but virtually speaking, many of these teams have just started, so such this one. Should have watched this one, even though, the graphic settings is on low, which maintains 270 FPS in-game. There's a list of others I would sit and check. For some reason, they're still reminiscent to something, which others probably will remember. Kid is a fan of boomer shooters. I wouldn't say too much really beyond it. Sure, he could always sit and play Quake or the original Doom. we'll just simply play, like I said, Quake or Quake 3 every now and again. Yeah, it's just the choices comes back down to the individual. Doesn't come right into the choices others would state. But I'm no hero either, but I'll just say clear. That's an agenda matter. You can't always win. You can't always be feeling comfortable about stuff. Remains tried and true, but even that is starting to get me feeling less comfortable. I won't give up even mentioning of the arts. There aren't many 120 FPS streamers on the Twitch service either. I know that. The difference is still, at least to me, is noticeable. Doesn't mean I've been giving up on making music. In fact, here and there I still do like little bass lines and melodies and some other impactful stuff. Though not full-blown mixes. It leaves a simple question if I've lost the passion, and I probably have had in a way. Can still choose to create. Not care what. Well, others around me would think anyway. Just let this slide up. Still feel like that's a bad option. Turning back. Feeling in many cases do seemingly seem messy. An uneasy reality check. Through the intentional destruction of nature, both land and in sea. Still appreciating, of course, well, the places where there can still be such events when in the natural world. Well, which was about to say, performing its struggles. Sometimes it's not as it seems. And other surprises too. A couple of shows were explaining about the impacts as well. Overfishing and in one particular example I'm thinking, in the case of when people fish, industrial fishing for one thing, and as well as that, the dumping of waste on the oceans too, and other changes too to the environment within many animals in it and that stuff. The deliberate destruction of Amazon as well. The whole situation within the intentional destruction. But still, we speak about the form of some other stories too for members to take notice. There really wasn't really much I wanted to share, really. But I can explain normally when simulcasting, both of the encodes are hardware instead of putting one as hardware and the other software, recognizing it will break performance in the PC, which I'm stream and all that. It's a different situation with only running OBS Studio, at least with me, if I'm only running it on Twitch. It really isn't much else outside of that. I'm still proud about what I've accomplished as a streamer, of course. Things are different, really, when considering about the current impact of the AI that's happening in gaming. Being affected with, of course, a few games, too, that I notice that were just done with so little effort. But they aren't fully fledged games, but in any case, it's I'm aware of how it's dangerous too. Stuff in terms of what it has, what it really brings. Quite often now, and I will admit straight up, I'm usually watching really high-ranked players of Apex Legends, really. Fighting each match. Don't always get it, of course, high. In the high positions. Can be satisfying, particularly when battles are tight between 2 or 3 really similar level teams, excuse me. Wouldn't drop that for nothing. Won't drop being, finding pleasure out of it. Except the situation I'm in. Bring it up as recently I've not had much success. It's part of the project and just in the choice, but this is why that he just sticks and does it his way, doesn't run by the other soldiers' rules, or doesn't follow the crowd. It isn't his way. Whichever stuff gets him going, it's just how it would run. Just a It's not to say it's fate or anything of the sort. When he does want to take a break from some of the action, he would just sit down and just take a break. But he's in here in a bit of a question about, is it worth it? Worth continuing? As a hunter who does things by himself, and it just continues the question. There would actually be moments where, of course, his adrenaline would flow and he would just go on and just play. He's running a lot of older games, but at least he's knowing that there's purpose behind having to run older games as well. That isn't to say experiences of a handful of other games were pointless. They still maintain those higher standards, which sadly is not the case nowadays. It now inserts so many AI-generated projects, but a few of them would be unique to the user or the player playing them. However, that does not mean it will be kept as such. But a pattern I've noticed since mid-2025. Well, is the experience worth continuing? Is it still a hobby to continue to just enjoy it as best as we can play? It's true, I do watch much more than I stream as well. Sometimes even just sitting and watching stream as well, letting the action flow. But like I said, it's just not so easy. After things I've done and a range of other certain other programs where maybe it's not worth really going back to run. Keeping what, just to keep searching at least for little areas of pleasure. Steam itself has become just too crowded of games that's just pure, which it's turned really in more of a mess than it used to be. And we can't forget the AI disclosures too. As I've already said multiple times, it's not all junk. This is a different war zone, which I'm not as familiar with. It becomes a small orgy. Friend slop games. Projects that emphasize on a lot of rough sketches and terrible imagery to replace, using pretty amateurish details and graphics as well in making projects done by hand instead of in AI, using AI. There's only a handful of super projects, the ones which they've remained great experiences, for several years, in fact. From the other project I did like before, knowing about the swarm of hackers who continue to fester, the Call of Duty series. Other shooter games. And there's a few I know of that do also contain hacks and cheaters in those projects. It's not only that. In one way, if it's not playing against CPU, it's relentless punishment. And do play to the best of my personal ability. Not all the time. Every once in a while, I still have what is described as a more casual focus, where being absolute isn't really as critical. But even I'm not as accurate in doing it, even in very serious sessions. To repeat it isn't something I describe as futile. I won't go that far. 22:01 p.m. Local, 23:01 JST. Just continue to search the area. Don't have to rush and make. Don't take the lunge. Just stay where you are. They'll hunt out. They'll be hunted out in due time. Found out. Sniped. Still needed backup. Just continue to let this one flow. Just the being is a little cocky. Maybe a problem. But I did as well. Don't really feel as comfortable about the current generation, and they've been speaking a lot of that brain rot stuff. But some of them don't really care. The kid alts, some of them who really do find that stuff beautiful. Messed up. Yeah, in many respects. Can't be the hero if all you hear is the same propaganda. Can't wade through such trash and really messy projects and have that dreaded feeling where it won't even last at all. Beats the trend and then it moves on to the next. Battle's over. This group is the champions. So there's that. Game's up. They've said victory. Is this one also finished? Yeah. There ain't much around. I'll stay with these. It's quieter. Down on this list. Search. But if something comes, something comes. So the other stream, it's Counter-Strike 2. One of them running at 120 FPS. Didn't really focus on it. I was in the menu screen for a while. Still can just watch the fluidity. Desert Eagle pistol. Just continue just to check a couple of things. Consider play another game. Do we run the Suica game? I could. Wouldn't mind it, actually. Break the monotony. But using... Run it on the other computer, on this PC. Took a few seconds to boot up. This may be a bit excessive. I mean, I don't think so. Run it, and that's what I will do. Might be a bit messy, but it's something better than running it on the other. In hooking the switch up, as I used to do. The Switch console. Can't go upon. Fusion. Seriously, even I'm left a bit underwhelmed would be the word I would use. It's exactly how it is. Yeah, it can. Well, in the right mood, it can be simple entertainment. Well, more than simple entertainment, anyway. Salvageable, huh? Was gonna add all, then I'm gonna run one game, that was it. Still, it's quite uncomfortable. Straight sensation. These two others. Pause you. Leave that window closed. Bitch around too much, would I? Just stay where you are. Yeah, you don't need me to explain that I'm just feeling the same as I had been before. You would run in the game, I'll run the game. Still comes back down to the mindset. Sure. The CPU bots. I'm aware, well, what exists. But some aren't functional, that is the issue. When it comes really to some experiences, which it does deserve a storyline, and as many free-to-play experiences, and just to continue, of course, the microtransactions situations. For the best pleasure in some games, you have to have money to just play them, and all that stuff. Play it the way it should have been intended. But when it just becomes like casinos, that's the thing. You get ripped off every once in a while. Whether something's considered decent. It would be best not to waste money. Not that way. But yeah, it's a scourge. This matter isn't gonna go away. It'll never go away. Still know the times when I was still a teenager when it was implemented in games. In the Xbox Live Store. Live Store and that and Live Arcade and them type of games. Truly getting... You be having to spend small fortunes. Another word I'm trying to think. Small amounts of money that I spend in not just the game, but of the other microtransactions and so on. It becomes just as addictive as gacha. Still isn't finding the experience fun, really. It's a case where we're rolling this. Just rolling on. No way to stop. That sense of it might be time to actually try ASMR stuff. I need a microphone, that's the thing. And there's not really too much else than what GEKIDO Beasts wants to do now. It's accustomed more so on just run, streams of players running Apex Legends over anything else. Another mic check. Checking canal. Yep, knows you. It's all fine. It's never been simple in explaining the genuine feelings. I've only run a handful of games, but there's not much I'll run, honestly. That importance of first impressions. Other reasons to improve the detail. We aren't being constantly punished by going back to the beginning. There's a reason the term Kaizo exists as well. The kind of games I'll never play personally. Constant punishment. From start to finish. And thus, there's stuff like the glitch fests that happen in like Super Mario Brothers 3 or Super Mario World, in TAS. Tool assisted speedruns. It does occasionally still give me surprising layers of satisfaction. Many games can't really be usurped or improved. Some RTAs, however, there still can be world records broken. Others breaking their personal best record. It adds another deeper layer of and the expectation that there can still be really small areas where the scores or times can be improved. Sure, it might be out of my league, but there still will be those pros who won't stop playing such games because, they will worry about the shortcuts. Wouldn't even give it up for anything else. For some, that's really just how they find pleasure, even if there's a lot of pain, right? That sense of purpose too, but not for all. But speaking through these realizations in a different perspective than others. But I'm quite a fan of some of the TAS playthroughs. No, I'm really serious about that. Repeating the old school is really the school I might be in. There's a caveat as well about it. For most players, they just don't have any interest in it. There's only a tiny clique who would only find such runs of worth. A pleasure, really, that not only find only if they relate. Or where they too similar interests and similar other reasons and interests. You messed it up. Yeah, you did. But you ended in 6th, that's at least... Well, it's a place where I don't think you can improve from where you were. That picture again, huh? Yeah. The flow is still 60. But the flow of the other is 120. Staying with it because... Staying with these. And another's at a tight place, and they have the potential to be the champions, too. I'm just going to continue to check. Won't stop having to be, a fan of what I do. Sure. I'm considered... Perhaps a nuisance to the way I roll. I'm just gonna stay true to myself. But sure, it may suck. I still have some other issues around the arms. It's not going away. Neck muscles. There's a problem down there too. Rarely, and I will say it as well. do I really use the phone, no matter the reasoning. About as old school as it does get, but maybe not full-blown old school, but one who never uses a phone, of course, to check other things out. There's many who do that. To preoccupy some others. That's really up to those individuals. I mean, there's others which they're around and wouldn't exactly cause such a problem. In any case, there really isn't exactly too much I can say. Just stay in a comfortable spot. And don't get any wrong ideas. Because it's just as easy just getting over the becoming overconfident about what you play. This goes back to the individual. Which is the way you want to walk? What's the way that you want us to stay around? Minding everyone else's business. Just leaving the experiences in your own head. I don't think you're worthy. Bug's still in the place. It does suck that they have to be here. There's places where I'd rather kill them and do what I need to do. Blood is filled up. Just checking if this team wins out. That's why I'm still watching. Felt you that time. There's the bug squished. Killed off. Even now, I'll leave it to run. There might be small moments that may be of worth. A two-piece. Just emerge out briefly. Well, would have been unlikely you would have come through with, of course, success. Letting the ring close. Didn't take the target. Two of them. I just saw two targets. That's really all I've seen. Remaining focused on the job. And I need to continue to do so. Follow through. Critical. Doesn't have any choice but to restore. Circumstance, though, to jump. Just going for broke on that. 2v2. The others have won. Looks it. There's all or nothing on the strike. Victory. Do you like those tight finishes in those occasions? I really can't comment further. No, it's just GGWP. Another team finished in second. Not to say The one I was watching wasn't. They actually won. They were the champions in the match. Get back shortly. I'm just gonna ask a break. Speak to the other me too. I still can do what I can do. If I still do 120, I won't ever give up on doing that. I think it collapsed quick. You said it before. Could be in a musical mood. So he's in a musical mood. What then? That's the question. Won't close it without reasons. Shall we do that? Yeah, I say we should. I'll talk further back and not, just to slip things out. Yeah, well, the things are... It's much more relaxed, I'll say. While I'm here, I was thinking of also, well, checking out a show. Why resist? Would be unwise to head out close to midnight. Just stroll out. I will stay right here. Get off alone, you know what happens. Nothing really happens. Face to face with nature. Face to face with nature. If that's how it wants to be, if it wanted to go that way. You're feeling empty. You know for several months you felt empty. But like I would almost stopped searching. I'm not feeling as committed anymore. Not to gaming. And already looking at the consequences too of AI in games. The phenomena of generative AI and AI agents. Is part of a much larger problem that's unfolded. We've entrusted the real world in letting them face the fears. Breaking from the norms of maintain deeper layers of protection in the system. The war cries. Well, I would rather be seen and heard. And knowing that their impact would make a difference, but it doesn't. In a difference in a system that wasn't dominated by AI, it could have worked out. Yet, we've seen too many who don't think outside the box anymore. Who aren't risk takers and just sticking with, of course, the rote, boring experiences or established IPs. Established. Not to say it's all negative. For some, it's better that they know that projects which still seem to be respected. But that doesn't really mean that they get it right either. Still a couple of projects I'll stay with, which they've done well, I'll say that way. Amongst the pool really filled of AI-generated content. That most of it is projects which were done with very little effort. They didn't work hard on all aspects. Then again, whilst I was also reading, many of these, well, who have one, maybe two, maybe three members in their team, where they may not be able, for example, to program do the programming well, but they may design well, and others who about to then say who do play tests and quality and the quality of life stuff, but aren't exactly skilled on other stuff. This is back to back this team's champions. That's what I will say. And still watching. Might be a small stream, but 120 it rolls. It's exactly like I said. This one's offline. Yeah. The other 120 streamer just disappeared. Need to be right here, not over there. The snack I will take. FPS ratings. Still in the hundreds. It can hover right up to 200 FPS. Of course, I don't actually need to be knowing about with the original Super Mario Brothers and how that was significant in real world environments, right? Another video game crash. So something else happened in that era too. Isn't it weird where have some similarities unfolded of understanding where we have a feeling of the similarities between them games and these games and that. Can't really wait any longer. I'm just wanting the snack, okay? Check what the big hits are. Beast of Reincarnation. Not really much outside of that. Big Walk. Might have a look at that. Really gonna take an actual look at this. Not that I'm actually in the mood to get it or anything, but it's just... I was hearing it is quite a deviation from the norm, in the way that I've seen this program. Now, I will look. So I was hearing it also is from the developers of, the Untitled to Goose game as well. So that's why this was quite a big deal, this. Chances maybe I could, but it'd be wiser just to know, the choice, really. Someone else returned with another attempted RTA. We might be getting overkill here. But I want to avoid being in the case stuck on running too many streams at once. It is a little messy, I'll say, because there's some bad optimizations on Google Chrome itself. It's gonna take a snack now. Some old-fashioned savory snacks. Potato chips. It does seem you're aware what was up. The way they're moving around. When I have a proper look at these models in Big Walk. Models which seem like they're straight out of a tech demo of the 1980s. Really. Just reading as well about the video game crash of 1983 as well. Decision of Big Walk, yep, I just only realized it too. Champions again now. Champions again. Anyway, wouldn't really know what else to repeat. We're out of my little time already running the... Yeah. Snack machine. Well, there's no way I'm gonna say farewell. We'll never leave. I would... well... I did say months ago, it gives me purpose as well. Doing, well, the gaming and the music. Well, more the gaming nowadays. At the moment, this other, yeah, like I said, Big Walk was what I was only looking at. Along with, well, watching some plays in Apex Legends. Soon, not yet, but soon, yeah, will be the launch of the new season, marked as it's known. Well, it looked like I said it was going to be the name of the new season. What I looked at before, but it may be different. I didn't see the number. It may be either it is called that or it's going to be called something else. But I mean, I didn't see thoroughly, so I can't clarify that. I'm just going to speak really quickly now. What I have to say. Do a Test first. Test first. No problem. It's all fine there. Yeah, prior to 1982, Activision was one of only a handful of third parties publishing games for the Atari VCS, or Atari 2600, as it then was known later. By 1982, Activision's success emboldened numerous other competitors to penetrate the market. However, the Activision co-founder, David Crane, observed that several of these companies were supported by venture capitalists attempting to emulate the success of Activision. Without the experience and skill of Activision's team, these inexperienced competitors mostly created games of poor quality, which Crane notably described as the worst games you can imagine. While Activision's success could be attributed to the team's existing familiarity with the Atari VCS, other publishers had no such advantage. The rapid growth of the third-party game industry was easily illustrated by the number of vendors present at the semi-annual Consumer Electronics Show, CES. According to Crane, the number of third-party developers jumped from 3 to 30 between two consecutive events. At the summer 1982 CES, there were 17 companies, including MCA Inc. and Fox Video Games, announcing a combined 90 new Atari games. By 1983, an estimated 100 companies were attempting to leverage the CES into a foothold in the market. Atari Age documented 158 different vendors that had developed for the Atari VCS. In June 1982, the Atari games on the market numbered just 100, which grew to over 400 by December. Experts predicted a glut in 1983, with only 10% of games producing 75% of sales. That's, I don't know what that was. Like a computer magazine. Yep. Byte stated in December. In 1982, few games broke new ground in either design or format. If the public really likes an idea, it is milked for all it's worth, and numerous clones of a different color soon crowd the shelves. That is, until the public stops buying or something better comes along. Companies who believe that microcomputer games are the hula hoop of the 1980s only want to play quick profit. End quote. Bill Kunkel said in January 1983 that companies had, quote here, licensed everything that moves, walks, crawls, or tunnels beneath the earth. You have to wonder how tenuous the connection will be between the game and the movie Marathon Man. What are you going to do? Present a video game root canal? End quote. By September 1983, the Phoenix stated that 2600 cartridges were no longer a growth industry. VCS cartridges, I think. Activision, Atari, and Mattel all had experienced programmers, but many of the new companies rushing to join the market did not have the expertise or talent to create quality games. Titles such as the Kaboom, like Lost Luggage, Rock Band Tie-In, Journey Escape, and the plate spinning game Disaster were examples of titles made in the hopes of taking advantage of the video game boom, but later proved unsuccessful with retailers and potential customers. The flood of new games were released into a limited competitive space. According to Activision's Jim Levy, they had projected that the total cartridge market in 1982 would be around 60 million, anticipating Activision would be able to secure between 12% and 15% of that market for their production numbers. However, with at least 50 different companies in the new market space, and each having produced between 1 and 2 million cartridges, along with Atari's own estimated 60 million cartridges in 1982, there was over 200% production of the actual demand for cartridges in 1982. which contributed to the stockpiling of unsold inventory during the crash. Inexpensive home computers had been first introduced in 1977. By 1979, Atari unveiled the 400 and 800 computers, built around a chipset originally meant for use in a game console, and which retailed for the same price as their respective names. In 1981, IBM introduced the first IBM personal computer with a $1,565 base price, equivalent to $5,542 in 2025. By 1982, new desktop computer designs were commonly providing better color graphics and sound than game consoles, and personal computer sales were booming. The TI-99/4A and the Atari 400 were both at $349. The TIS, we're speaking in the back in them days, that's equivalent to $1,164 in 2025. The TIS-80 color computer sold at $379, and Commodore International had just reduced the price of the VIC-20 to $199, and the Commodore 64 to $499. Because computers generally had more memory and faster processors than a console, they permitted more sophisticated games. A 1984 compendium of reviews of Atari 8-bit software used 198 pages for games, compared to 167 for all other software types. Home computers could also be used for tasks such as word processing and home accounting. Games were easier to distribute, since they could be sold on floppy disks or cassette tapes instead of ROM cartridges. This opened the field to a cottage industry of third-party software developers. Writable storage media allowed players to save games in progress, a useful feature for increasingly complex games which was not available on the consoles of the era. In 1982, a price war that began between Commodore and Texas Instruments led to home computers becoming as inexpensive as video game consoles. After Commodore cut the retail price of the Commodore 64 to $300 in June 1983, some stores began selling it for as little as $199. Dan Gutman, founder in 1982 of Video Games Player magazine, in an article in 1987, recalled in 1983 that people asked themselves, why should I buy a video game system when I can buy a computer that will play games and do so much more? End quote. The Boston Phoenix stated in September 1983 about the cancellation of the Intellivision 3. Who was going to pay $200+ for a machine that could only play games? Commodore explicitly targeted video game players. The spokesman, William Shatner, asked in VIC-20 commercials, why buy just a video game from Atari or Intellivision? Stating that, quote here, unlike games, it has a real computer keyboard, yet plays great games too, end quote. Commodore's ownership of the chip fabricator MOS technology allowed manufacture of integrated circuits in-house, so the VIC-20 and C64 sold for much lower prices than competing home computers. In addition, both Commodore computers were designed to utilize the ubiquitous Atari controllers so they could tap into the existing controller market. A quote here. I've been in retailing 30 years, and I have never seen any category of goods get on a self-destruct pattern like this, end quote, from a service merchandise executive that told the New York Times in June 1983. The price war was so severe that in September, the Coleco CEO, Arnold Greenberg, welcomed rumors of an IBM Peanut, or the IBM PC Junior, in this instance, because although IBM was a competitor, it is a company that knows how to make money. More quotes here. I look back a year or two in the video game field or the home computer field. How much better everyone was when most people were making money, rather than very few, end quote. Companies reduced production in the middle of the year because of weak demand, even as prices remained low, causing shortages as sales suddenly rose during the Christmas season. Only the Commodore 64 was widely available, with an estimated more than 500,000 computers sold during Christmas. The 99/4A was such a disaster for Texas Instruments that the company's stock immediately rose by 25% after the company discontinued it and exited the home computer market in late 1983. J.C. Penney announced in December 1983 that it would soon no longer sell home computers because of the combination of low supply and low prices. Radio Shack avoided drastic price cuts for its own home computers and remained profitable in 1983. By that year, Gutman wrote the following: "Video games were officially dead and computers were hot." He renamed his magazine Computer Games in October 1983, but, quote here, "I noticed that the word games became a dirty word in the press. We started replacing it with simulations as often as possible," end quote. Soon, and another quote here, "the computer slump began. Suddenly, everyone was saying that the home computer was a fad, just another hula hoop." Yep. Computer Games published its last issue in late 1984. In 1988, Computer Gaming World founder Russell Sipe noted that, quote, the arcade game crash of 1984 took down the majority of the computer game magazines with it. He stated that by the winter of 1984, only a few computer game magazines remained, and by mid-1985, Computer Gaming World was the only full-color computer game magazine left. Immediate effect, says the next. That's the next point. Let's take another sip of water. Yes. Start again. With the release of so many new games in 1982 that flooded the market, most stores had insufficient space to carry new games and consoles. In December 1982, Atari announced that it had not met its projected sales target for the holiday season, which caused a notable drop in video game-related stocks. Excuse me. Atari's announcement forced iMagic to pull their IPO slated for that month. As the stores tried to return the surplus games to the new publishers, the publishers had neither new products nor cash to issue refunds to the retailers. Many publishers, including Games by Apollo and US Games, quickly folded. Unable to return the unsold games to defunct publishers, stores marked down the titles and placed them in discount bins and sale tables. Recently released games were initially sold for $35, equivalent to $116 in 2024, which were initially sold for $35, were in bins for $5 or $16 in 2024. The presence of third-party sales drew the market share that the console manufacturers had. Atari's share of the cartridge game market fell from 75% in 1981 to less than 40% in 1982, which negatively affected their finances. The bargain sales of poor-quality titles further drew sales away from the more successful third-party companies like Activision due to poorly informed consumers being drawn by price to purchase the bargain titles rather than quality. By June 1983, the market for the more expensive games had shrunk dramatically and was replaced by a new market of rushed-to-market, low-budget games. Crane said that those awful games flooded the market at huge discounts and ruined the video game business. A massive industry shakeout resulted. The Magnavox Odyssey 2 manufacturer, North American Philips, dissolved its video game operations entirely. iMagic announced significant layoffs and a pivot away from video game production. The company collapsed 3 years later. Mattel sold its entire video game division, including the Intellivision, to the company's senior vice president of marketing. Activision had to downsize across 1984 and 1985 due to loss of revenue and to stay competitive and maintain financial security, began development of games for the personal computer. Within a few years, Activision no longer produced cartridge-based games and focused solely on personal computer games. Atari was one of the companies most affected by the crash. As a company, its revenue dropped significantly due to dramatically lower sales and cost of returned stock. By mid-1983, the company had lost $356 million, was forced to lay off 30% of its 10,000 employees and move all manufacturing to Hong Kong and Taiwan. Unsold Pac-Man, E.T. the Extraterrestrial, and other 1982 and 1983 games and consoles started to fill their warehouses. In September 1983, Atari discreetly buried much of this excess stock in a landfill near Alamogordo, New Mexico, though Atari did not comment about their activity at the time. Misinformation related to the sales of Pac-Man and E.T. led to the urban legend of the Atari video game burial, that millions of unsold cartridges were buried there. Gaming historians received permission to dig up the landfill as part of a documentary in 2014, during which the former Atari executive James Heller, who had overseen the original burial, clarified that only about 728,000 cartridges had been buried in 1982, backed by estimates made during the excavation and disproving the scale of the urban legend. Atari's burial remains an iconic representation of the 1983 video game crash. By the end of 1983, Atari had over $536 million in losses, leading Warner Communication to sell Atari's consumer products division in 1984 to Jack Tramiel, who had recently departed Commodore International. Tramiel's new company took the name Atari Corporation, and they directed their efforts into developing their new personal computer line, the Atari ST, of the console business. Lack of confidence in the video game sector caused many retailers to stop selling video game consoles or reduced their stock significantly, reserving floor or shelf space to other products. Retailers established to exclusively sell video games folded, which impacted sales of personal computer games. Chuck E. Cheese's Pizza Time Theater filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in 1984, partially due to the crash. The company was eventually bought by the competitor Showbiz Pizza Plates, and the two companies merged in 1986 as Showbiz Pizza Time Inc., later known as CEC Entertainment. The full effects of the industry crash was not felt until 1985. Despite Atari's claim of 1 million in worldwide sales of its 2600 game system that year, recovery was slow. The sales of home video games had dropped from $3.2 billion in 1982 to $100 million in 1985. Analysts doubted the long-term viability of the video game industry, and, according to Electronic Arts' Trip Hawkins, it had been very difficult to convince retailers to carry video games due to the stigma carried by the fall of Atari until 1985. In late 1985, the Nintendo Entertainment System saw a limited release in North America, with a nationwide release the following year. Following in 1986, the industry began recovering, and by 1988, annual sales in the industry exceeded $2.3 billion, with 70% of the market dominated by Nintendo. By in 1986, Nintendo president Hiroshi Yamauchi noted that Atari collapsed because they gave too much freedom to third-party developers, and the market was swamped by rubbish games. End quote. In response, Nintendo limited the amount of titles that third-party developers could release for their system each year, and promoted its seal of quality. Yep. Which it allowed to be used on games and peripherals by publishers that met Nintendo's quality standards. Well, that's how that ended, huh? I'll return shortly. Yep. You liking it? Then don't worry. There's more. I just need a break. Take a break. And rather high levels of energy. Even just speaking when I have to speak. Yeah, well, I'm about to eat ice cream. If you I can watch. Good. Seem I'm still in charge. continue on. It's all sad anyway. Let's get going. Longer term effects next. It's about the only segment I'm going to sit and read. The crash in 1983 had the largest impact in the United States. It rippled through all sectors of the global video game market worldwide. Though sales of video games still remained strong in Japan, Europe, and Canada from the beleaguered American companies. It took several years for the US industry to recover. The estimated $42 billion worldwide market in 1982, including arcade, console, and computer games, dropped to $14 billion by 1985. There was also a significant shift in the home video game market, away from consoles to personal computer software between 1983 and 1985. 1984 is when some of the longer-term effects started to take a toll on the video game console. Companies like Magnavox decided to pull out of the video game console industry. The general consensus was that video games were just a fad that came as quickly as they left. But outside of North America, the video game industry was doing very well. Home consoles were growing in popularity in Japan, while home computers were surging across Europe. United States sales fell from $3 billion to around $100 million in 1985. During the holiday season of 1985, Hiroshi Yamauchi decided to go to New York small markets about putting their products in their stores. Minoru Arakawa offered a money-back guarantee from Nintendo that they would pay back for any stock that was left unsold. In total, Nintendo sold 50,000 units, about half the units they shipped to the USA. The US video game crash had two long-lasting results. The first result was that dominance in the home console market shifted from the USA to Japan. The crash did not directly affect the financial viability of the video game market in Japan, but it still came as a surprise there and created repercussions that changed that industry and thus became known as the Atari shock. Prior to the crash, Jonathan Greenberg of Forbes had predicted in early 1981 that Japanese companies would eventually dominate the North American video game industry, as American video game companies were increasingly licensing products from Japanese companies, who in turn were opening up North American branches. By 1982-1983, Japanese manufacturers had captured a large share of the North American arcade market, which Gene Lipkin of Data East USA partly attributed to Japanese companies having more finances to invest in new ideas. As the crash was happening in the USA, Japan's game industry started to shift its attention from arcade games to home consoles. On July 15, 1983, two new home consoles were released in Japan: the Nintendo Family Computer, the Famicom, and Sega's SG-1000, which was later supplanted by the Master System, heralding the third generation of home consoles retrospectively. Excuse me. Let's continue shortly. Let's say it once more. Continuing on now. These two consoles were very popular, buoyed by an economic bubble in Japan. The units readily outsold Atari and Mattel's existing systems, and with both Atari and Mattel focusing on recovering domestic sales, the Japanese consoles effectively went uncontested over the next few years. By 1986, 3 years after its introduction, 6.5 million Japanese homes, 19% of the population, owned a Famicom, and Nintendo began exporting it to the US, where the home console industry was only just recovering from the crash. The impact on the retail sector of the crash was the most formidable barrier that confronted Nintendo as it tried to market the Famicom in the United States. A planned deal with Atari to distribute the Famicom in North America fell apart in the wake of the crash, resulting in Nintendo handling the international release themselves 2 years later. Additionally, retailer opposition to video games was directly responsible for causing Nintendo to brand its product the Nintendo Entertainment System rather than a video game system, and using terms such as Control Deck and Game Pack, as well as producing a toy robot called Rob to convince toy retailers to allow it in their stores. Furthermore, the design for the NES used a front-loading cartridge slot to mimic how videocassette recorders, popular at that time, were loaded, further pulling the NES away from previous console designs. By the time the US video game market recovered in the late 1980s, the NES was by far the dominant console in the United States, leaving only a fraction of the market to Atari. By 1989, home video game sales in the United States had reached $5 billion, surpassing the 1982 peak of $3 billion during the previous generation. A large majority of the market was controlled by Nintendo. It sold more than 35 million units in the USA, exceeding the sales of other consoles and personal computers by a considerable margin. New Japanese companies entered the market to challenge Nintendo's success in the USA, with NEC's TurboGrafx 16 and the Sega Genesis Mega Drive, both released in the USA in 1989. While the TurboGrafx underwhelmed in the market, the Genesis's release set the stage for a major rivalry between Sega and Nintendo in the early 1990s in the USA video game market. Don't really think there's much really for me to share outside of that. I'll keep reading. Just need another snack. Now I'm just going to snack on more ice cream for the moment. Starting soon. Yeah. It's another shock humor shit. Ignorance is bliss, huh? might take a bit longer. Just for now, stand by until further orders. Fine. He's quite a deep read. In any case, I will continue to finish it off shortly. Need to finish off ice cream. Finish off the ice cream first. I'm close to feeling full. Video, video game crash of 1983. This wiki page, Wikipedia page. Sure, I'll finish it. Seal that. Move away. Doing this first again. Yes. Let's get rolling again. It's a bit of a cleanup just before getting back and starting. Right. In the impact on third-party software development, it's quite a big read, this stuff. A second highly visible result of the crash was the advancement of measures to control third-party development of software. Using secrecy to combat industrial espionage had failed to stop rival companies from reverse engineering the Mattel and Atari systems and hiring away their trained game programmers. While Mattel and Coleco implemented lockout measures to control third-party development, the ColecoVision BIOS, checked for a copyright string on PowerUp. The Atari 2600 was completely unprotected, and once information on its hardware became available, little prevented anyone from making games for the system. Nintendo thus instituted a strict licensing policy for the NES that included equipping the cartridge and console with lockout chips, which were region-specific and had to match in order for a game to work. In addition to preventing the use of unlicensed games, it also was designed to combat software piracy, rarely a problem in North America or Western Europe, but rampant in East Asia. The concepts of such a control system remain in use on every major video game console produced today, even with fewer cartridge-based consoles on the market than in the 8/16-bit era. Replacing the security chips in most modern consoles are specially encoded optical discs that cannot be copied by most users and can only be read by a particular console under normal circumstances. Accolade achieved a technical victory in one court case against Sega, challenging this control, even though it ultimately yielded and signed the Sega licensing agreement. Several publishers, notably Tengen, Atari Games, Color Dreams, and Camerica, challenged Nintendo's control system during the 8-bit era by producing unlicensed NES games. Initially, Nintendo was the only developer for the Famicom. Under pressure from Namco and Hudson Soft, it opened the Famicom to third-party development, but instituted a license fee of 30% per game cartridge for these third parties to develop games, a system used by console manufacturers to this day. Nintendo maintained strict manufacturing control and requiring payment in full before manufacturing. Cartridges could not be returned to Nintendo, so publishers assumed all the financial risk of selling all units ordered. Nintendo limited most third-party publishers to only 5 games per year on its systems. Some companies try to get around this by creating additional company labels like Konami's Ultra Games label. Nintendo ultimately dropped this rule by 1993 after the release of the successor, Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Nintendo's all-encompassing oversight of the creation of the Famicom cartridges led to the manufacture of bootleg cartridges in Asian regions. Outside of Japan, Nintendo placed its Nintendo seal of quality on all licensed games released for the system to try to promote authenticity and detract from bootleg sales, but failed to make significant traction to stalling these sales. As Nintendo prepared to release the Famicom in the United States, it wanted to avoid both the bootleg problem it had in Asia as well as the mistakes that led up to the 1983 crash. The company created the proprietary 10NES system, a lockout chip which was designed to prevent cartridges made without the chip from being played on the NES. The 10NES lockout was not perfect, as later in the NES's life cycle, methods were found to bypass it. But it did sufficiently allow Nintendo to strengthen its publishing control to avoid the mistakes Atari had made and initially prevent bootleg cartridges in the Western markets. These strict licensing measures backfired somewhat after Nintendo was accused of monopolistic behavior. In the long run, this pushed many Western third-party publishers such as Electronic Arts away from Nintendo consoles and supported competing consoles such as the Sega Genesis or Sony PlayStation. Most of the Nintendo platform control measures were adopted by later console manufacturers such as Sega, Sony, and Microsoft, although not as stringently. With waning console interests in the USA, the computer game market was able to gain a strong foothold in 1983 and beyond. Developers that had been primarily in the console game space, like Activision, turned their attention to develop computer game titles to stay viable. Newer companies also were founded to capture the growing interest in the computer games space with novel elements that borrowed from game consoles, as well as taking advantage of low-cost dial-up modems that allowed for multiplayer capabilities. The computer game market grew between 1983 and 1984, overtaking the console market, but overall video game revenue had declined significantly due to the considerable decline of the console market as well as the arcade market to an extent. The home computer industry, however, experienced a downturn in mid-1984, with global computer game sales declining in 1985 to a certain extent. Microcomputers dominated the European market throughout the 1980s, and with domestic production for those formats thriving over the same period. There was minimal transatlantic ripple from American game production and trends, and thus minimal effect from the crash. Partly as a distant knock-on effect of the crash and partly due to the continuing quality of homegrown computer and microcomputer games, consoles did not achieve a dominant position in some European markets until the early 1990s. In the United Kingdom, there was a short-lived home console market between 1980 and 1982, but the 1983 crash led to the decline of consoles in the UK, which was offset by the rise of LCD games in 1983 and then the rise of computer games in 1984. It was not until the late 1980s, with the arrival of the Master System and the NES, that the console market recovered in the UK. Computer games remained the dominant sector of the UK home video game market up until they were surpassed by Sega and Nintendo consoles in 1991. See, that's a situation just to reread. It was to do with also reading about Super Mario Brothers. I may as well just do that too. Alright. We'll still read that in any case. Just a little feel a bit degraded. Well, it isn't feeling right. But it's not a fatigue thing. Boredom. Can continue to watch multiple Apex Legends streamers really. Otherwise, I ain't really even doing much. But somewhere we need to break the ice. It's still solid frozen. It needs to be broken somehow. I'm not sure exactly what to build. Different lines. Different agenda. Something. I'm really as confused. I just want to break the cycle somehow. It's what I'm just aiming to try anyway. In any circumstance, I really need to be honest. I don't really want to continue to do this commentary. So they're just going to explain that I'm going to end it first and place a timer because, I've already went over what my main limit was. It was going to be over 3 minutes, or 3 hours. It went for longer. We'll just leave it at that point. Bye for now. Stream is over. Close it.